The wind howled across the empty stretch of Route 89 like a wounded animal, carrying with it the promise of the worst blizzard Montana had seen in 20 years. And Wyatt Sterling gripped the steering wheel of his Ford F-250, his calloused hands steady, despite the treacherous ice beneath his tires. The headlights cut through the swirling snow, illuminating a world that had turned entirely white. It was Christmas Eve, and he was driving home alone. Again, Wyatt had made peace with solitude years ago, or so he told himself. At 34, he'd built a life that made sense on paper, a successful ranch, financial security, and the respect of everyone in Clearwater County. What he didn't have was someone to share Christmas dinner with, someone to watch the snow fall beside, someone who saw past the stoic rancher exterior to the man underneath, who still believed in love, even if he'd stopped believing it was meant for him. The radio crackled with a weather warning, but Wyatt barely heard it. His mind was already at the ranch, mentally cataloging the chores that would need doing once the storm passed. The cattle would need extra feed. The pipes would need checking. Life on a ranch didn't pause for holidays or heartbreak. That's when he saw it, a dark shape on the side of the road, barely visible through the white curtain of snow. At first, he thought it was a deer or maybe an abandoned vehicle, but as his truck drew closer, his breath caught in his throat. It was a person, a young man hunched against the roadside guardrail, wearing nothing but a thin jacket that was completely inadequate for the sub-zero temperatures. Even from a distance, Wyatt could see him shaking violently. "Christ," Wyatt muttered, immediately pulling over. His heart hammered as he threw the truck into park and grabbed the emergency blanket from behind his seat. The cold hit him like a physical blow. The moment he opened the door, the wind tried to tear the blanket from his hands as he rushed toward the figure. Up close, he could see it was barely more than a kid, maybe 19 or 20, with dark hair plastered to his forehead and lips that had taken on a dangerous blue tinge. "Hey!" Wyatt called out, dropping to his knees beside him. "Can you hear?" "Me." The young man's eyes fluttered open, striking green eyes, even dulled by cold and exhaustion. He tried to speak, but his teeth were chattering too violently to form words. Wyatt didn't waste time with questions. He wrapped the blanket around the kid's shoulders, and one smooth motion, born from years of ranch work, lifted him into his arms. The young man was lighter than he should be, all sharp angles and fragile bones. "I've got you," Wyatt said firmly, carrying him toward the truck. "You're going to be okay." The kid made a weak sound of protest, but he didn't have the strength to resist. Wyatt carefully placed him in the passenger seat, cranking the heat to maximum before running around to the driver's side, as he pulled back onto the road. Wyatt stole glances at his unexpected passenger. The young man was drifting in and out of consciousness, his breathing shallow. Wyatt's ranch was still 15 miles away, but the hospital in Whitefish was 30 miles in the opposite direction. Through conditions that were rapidly becoming impassable, "Stay with me," Wyatt said, reaching over to adjust the blanket. "What's your name?" The kid's eyes opened again, focusing on Wyatt with an intensity that was surprising given his condition. When he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "Eli, Eli," Wyatt repeated, committing it to memory. "I'm Wyatt. You're safe now. I'm taking you to my ranch. It's closer than the hospital. We'll get you warm and figure out what happened, okay?" Eli nodded weakly, then closed his eyes again. Wyatt pressed down on the accelerator, pushing the truck as fast as he dared on the icy roads. Questions burned in his mind. What was someone so young doing out here alone on Christmas Eve? Where had he come from? But those questions could wait. Right now, the only thing that mattered was getting Eli somewhere warm before hypothermia claimed him. The drive felt eternal. Wyatt kept talking, nonsense mostly, just to keep Eli conscious. He talked about the ranch, about his horses, about the absurdly large Christmas tree he'd put up in his living room even though he'd be the only one to see it. "Almost there," Wyatt promised, as his ranch's gate finally appeared through the snow. "Just hold on a little longer." The ranch house was dark when they arrived, but warmth flooded out the moment Wyatt opened the door. He carried Eli straight to the guest bedroom, laying him on the bed with careful hands. "We need to get you out of these wet clothes," Wyatt said, already pulling off Eli's soaked sneakers. The kid's socks were frozen solid. Eli tried to help, but his fingers wouldn't cooperate. Wyatt worked efficiently with the practiced ease of someone who'd treated hypothermia in calves and foals. He stripped Eli down to his boxers, averting his eyes out of respect, even as his trained gaze catalogued concerning details, bruises in various stages of healing, ribs that were too prominent, and what looked like a healing split lip. Wyatt's jaw tightened, but he focused on the immediate problem. He wrapped Eli in the heavy quilts his mother had made, then rushed to start the fireplace in the adjoining sitting room, when he returned with warm broth and tea. Eli was more alert, his eyes tracking Wyatt's movements with a mixture of wariness and something that might have been hope. "Drink this slowly," Wyatt instructed, helping Eli sit up enough to sip the broth. "It'll help warm you from the inside." Eli's hands shook as he held the mug, but he managed several small sips. Color was slowly returning to his face, though he still looked impossibly fragile against the mountain of quilts. "Thank you," Eli whispered, his voice rough. "You saved my life." Wyatt pulled up a chair beside the bed, his expression serious. "What were you doing out there, Eli? On Christmas Eve, in the middle of nowhere, without proper clothes?"
Oh.
Eyes filled with tears, and he looked away, shame written across his features. I didn't have anywhere else to go." The words landed like a punch to Wyatt's gut. He'd heard similar stories before, read about them in the news, seen statistics about homeless LGBTQ youth. But seeing it in person, seeing this beautiful, a broken young man who'd nearly died alone in the snow, made it devastatingly real. "Your family?" Wyatt asked gently. Eli's laugh was bitter. "They're not my family anymore. They made that very clear when they found out I was gay. There it was. It's the truth that had left Eli abandoned on a Montana highway on the coldest night of the year." Wyatt felt anger building in his chest, not at Eli, but at the people who could do this to their own child. "They threw you out?" Wyatt's voice was carefully controlled. 3 days ago." Eli's voice cracked. "On my 20th birthday. My dad said I was no longer his son. That I was." He stopped, unable to continue. Wyatt reached out instinctively, placing his hand over Eli's. "You don't have to say it." Eli looked down at their joined hands, fresh tears spilling down his cheeks. "I've been trying to get to Missoula. I heard there were shelters there, resources for people like me, but I ran out of money for the bus in Whitefish. I started walking, and then the storm came." He shuddered. "I thought I was going to die out there. I thought maybe it would be easier if I did." "Don't say that." Wyatt's grip tightened.
Ow.
"Don't ever say that." Their eyes met, and something passed between the men, understanding. A connection that transcended the circumstances of their meeting. Wyatt saw himself reflected in Eli's expression. The loneliness, the fear of being rejected for who you loved, the desperate hope that somewhere in the world there was acceptance. "You're safe here," Wyatt said firmly. "For tonight, for Christmas, for as long as you need. I promise you that." Wyatt's tears fell harder now, but they seemed like tears of relief. "I don't even know you." "No," Wyatt agreed, a small smile touching his lips. "But we have time to fix that. Right now, you need to rest and get warm. We'll figure out everything else tomorrow." Eli nodded, exhaustion finally claiming him. His eyes drifted closed, but his hand remained clasped in Wyatt's. Wyatt sat there, for a long time, watching Eli sleep, feeling the weight of responsibility and something else, something he hadn't felt in years. It was too soon to name it, too fragile to examine closely. But as the firelight played across Eli's peaceful face, Wyatt knew with absolute certainty that finding this young man on the side of the road wasn't random. It was the beginning of something that would change both their lives forever. Outside, the blizzard raged on, but inside the ranch house, two souls had found shelter from very different storms. Wyatt woke on the couch in the sitting room, his neck protesting the awkward angle. Pale winter light filtered through the windows, and for a moment, he couldn't remember why he'd slept there instead of in his own bed. Then he remembered Eli. He sat up quickly, his eyes immediately going to the guest bedroom door. It was still closed. Moving quietly, Wyatt checked on his unexpected guest, relief flooding through him when he saw Eli still sleeping peacefully, his breathing steady and his color much improved in the kitchen. Wyatt started coffee and began preparing breakfast. He'd planned to spend Christmas alone with leftover pizza and football games. Now, he found himself making French toast, scrambling eggs, and frying bacon, the kind of breakfast his mother used to make on. Christmas morning, when he was a kid, he was setting the table when he heard movement from the guest room. A moment later, Eli appeared in the doorway, wrapped in one of Wyatt's flannel robes that was comically too large for his slender frame. "Morning," Wyatt said softly. "How are you feeling?" Eli's hair was mussed from sleep, and there was a vulnerability in his eyes that made Wyatt's chest ache. "Better, warmer. Is this real? Did you really bring me here?" "As real as it gets." Wyatt gestured to the table. "Hungry?" "I made enough for an army." Eli moved slowly, as if afraid sudden movements might shatter this fragile safety. When he sat down, Wyatt noticed him wince. "Are you hurt?" Wyatt asked, concern sharpening his voice. "Just sore," Eli said quickly. "From the cold. And from—" he trailed off. But Wyatt remembered the bruises he'd seen. They ate in comfortable silence for a while. Wyatt watched as Eli methodically worked through his plate, noting the way he savored each bite as if he hadn't had a decent meal in days. Which, Wyatt realized with a pang, was probably true. "This is amazing," Eli said finally. "Thank you. For everything. I don't know how I'll ever repay you." "You don't need to repay me," Wyatt said firmly. "But I do need to know the whole story, Eli. What happened after your parents kicked you out?" Eli set down his fork, his appetite apparently fading. He was quiet for so long that Wyatt thought he might not answer. But when he spoke, the words came tumbling out like a confession. "I grew up in Kalispell," Eli began. "Small town, conservative family. My dad's a pastor. Everyone knew everyone, and everyone had expectations about who I should be." He laughed bitterly. "I tried so hard to meet those expectations. I dated girls in high school. I joined the church youth group. I did everything right. But inside, I was dying." Wyatt listened, his heart breaking with every word. "When I got to college last year, I finally admitted the truth to myself. I met another guy in my dorm. For the first time in my life, I felt like I could breathe, like I could be myself." Eli's eyes were distant, remembering. "But someone saw us together, took pictures, sent them to my parents." "Christ," Wyatt muttered. "My dad called me home immediately, sat me down and asked me point blank if I was gay. I couldn't lie anymore. I was so tired of lying." Eli's voice cracked. "I thought maybe, if I was honest, if I explained how hard I'd tried to be different, they might understand, that they might still love me. But they didn't," Wyatt said quietly. Eli shook his head. "My dad said I was an abomination, that I was choosing sin over family. My mom just cried and said she didn't know where they'd gone wrong raising me." He wiped at his eyes angrily. "They gave me 3 days to pray and reconsider. When I couldn't tell them I'd changed, they told me to leave. My dad said as long as I was living in sin, I wasn't welcome in their home." "That's not love," Wyatt said fiercely. "That's not what family is supposed to be." "I know that now," Eli said. "But in that moment, I felt like I'd lost everything. I dropped out of school. I was only there on my parents' money anyway. I crashed with a friend for a couple days, but her parents weren't comfortable with it. So I started making my way to Missoula. I'd heard there were resources there, maybe even a shelter that would take me." "You were walking to Missoula?" Wyatt couldn't keep the disbelief from his voice. "That's over 100 miles. "I know it was stupid," Eli said quickly. "But I didn't have money for the full bus fare, and I didn't know what else to do. When the storm started, I tried to find shelter, but everything was closed for the holiday. I just kept walking until I couldn't anymore." Wyatt stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Outside, the world was blanketed in fresh snow, beautiful and deadly. Eli could have died out there, would have died if Wyatt hadn't been driving home at exactly that moment. "You're not going to any shelter," Wyatt said, turning back to face Eli. "You're staying here." Eli blinked. "What? You're staying here?" Wyatt repeated. "At least until you figure out your next steps. I have plenty of room, and I could use the help around the ranch if you're willing to work." "I don't know anything about ranching," Eli stammered. "You can learn." Wyatt moved back to the table, his decision made. Look, I know we just met, but I'm not sending you back out there, not when you have nowhere to go. Consider it a Christmas gift. Why would you do this for me? Eli's voice was small. You don't even know me? Wyatt sat down, meeting Eli's eyes directly. Because I was you once, he said quietly. Not the same situation, but I know what it's like to hide who you are. To be afraid that if people knew the truth, you'd lose everything. Eli's eyes widened. You're gay, yeah? Wyatt smiled slightly. I came out when I was 25. Lost some friends, gained a few, and learned who really mattered. But I had this ranch, had financial stability, had a support system. You don't have any of that. So I'm offering it to you. I can't accept this, Eli whispered, even as hope bloomed in his eyes. It's too much. You can, and you will, Wyatt said firmly. At least for now. Let's get through the holidays, get you back on your feet, and then you can decide what you want to do next. Deal? Eli stared at him for a long moment, emotions warring across his expressive face. Finally he nodded. Deal, but I'm going to earn my keep. I'm not a charity case. Never said you were, Wyatt said, relief washing through him. Now finish your breakfast. After that, I'll show you around the ranch. The next week passed in a blur of activity. The blizzard had left behind 3 feet of snow and a long list of ranch chores that needed attention. Wyatt put Eli to work immediately. Starting with simple tasks, feeding the chickens, mucking out stalls, helping repair a section of fence damaged by the weight of the snow, Eli threw himself into the work with an intensity that spoke of determination to prove his worth. He asked questions constantly, absorbed information like a sponge, and never complained even when Wyatt knew he must be exhausted and sore. What surprised Wyatt most was how naturally Eli fit into the rhythm of ranch life. He had a gentle way with the horses, a patience that couldn't be taught. The animals responded to him immediately, especially Wyatt's temperamental mare Dakota, who rarely tolerated anyone but Wyatt himself. You're a natural, Wyatt, observed one afternoon, watching as Eli brushed Dakota with careful, even strokes. Have you worked with horses before? Never, Eli admitted, but I like them. They don't judge you, you know? They don't care who you love or what your family thinks of you. They just accept you. Wyatt felt something shift in his chest. Every day, he discovered new layers to Eli's quick mind, his dry humor, his surprising resilience. And every day, it became harder to remember what the ranch had felt like before Eli arrived. They fell into an easy routine. Mornings were for chores, afternoons for ranch maintenance, and evenings for dinner and conversation by the fireplace. Eli was curious about everything, how Wyatt had built his business, why he'd chosen ranching, what it was like living in Montana as an openly gay man. It's not always easy, Wyatt admitted one night, nursing a whiskey while Eli drank hot chocolate. Rural Montana isn't exactly known for progressive attitudes. But I've earned respect through my work, and most people here judge you by your character and your work ethic, not who you take to bed. Do you date? Eli asked, then immediately flushed. Sorry, that's none of my business. It's fine, Wyatt said, though the question stirred something uncomfortable in him. I did for a while. There's a small gay community in Missoula, a couple hours away, but it never really worked out. Ranching isn't a 9-to-5 job, and not many guys want to deal with that. Plus, double quotes, he hesitated. Plus what? Eli prompted gently. Plus, I've always been looking for something real, Wyatt admitted. Not just hookups or casual dating. I want what my parents had, that deep connection, that partnership. But I'd pretty much accepted it wasn't in the cards for me. Eli was quiet for a moment. Past tense? He asked softly. Their eyes met across the firelight, and the air between them suddenly felt charged. Wyatt knew he should look away, should maintain the careful distance he'd been trying to preserve. But he couldn't. Maybe, he said honestly. Eli's breath caught. Wyatt watched the play of emotions across his face, hope, fear, uncertainty, and something that looked a lot like longing. Wyatt, Eli began, his voice trembling. I don't know if I should say this, but I need you to know. You've saved me in more ways than just that night on the road. For the first time since my parents kicked me out, I feel like I have a future. Like I matter. And it's because of you. Wyatt set down his glass, his heart pounding. Eli, let me finish, Eli interrupted. I know I'm young. I know I'm a mess. I know you probably see me as some charity project. But I need you to know that you're... He swallowed hard. You're everything I thought I'd never find. Kindness and strength and acceptance all wrapped up in one person. And I'm falling for you. I've been falling since that first night, and I can't stop myself. The confession hung in the air between them. Wyatt knew he should be rational, should point out all the reasons this was complicated. The age difference, the power dynamic, the fact that Eli was still healing from trauma, but his heart had other ideas. Come here, Wyatt said softly. Eli stood on shaky legs and crossed to where Wyatt sat. Wyatt reached up, cupping Eli's face with gentle hands, his thumbs brushing across sharp cheekbones. You're not a charity project, Wyatt said fiercely. You're brilliant and strong and braver than anyone I've ever met. And I've been fighting these feelings since the moment I saw you open those green eyes and tell me your name. Then stop fighting, Eli whispered. Wyatt pulled him down slowly, giving Eli every chance to pull away. But Eli came willingly, settling onto Wyatt's lap with a sigh that sounded like coming home. Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, a question and an answer all at once. Eli's lips were soft and warm, tasting faintly of chocolate. When they pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard. We should take this slow, Wyatt said, even as his hands splayed across Eli's back, pulling him closer. Slow, Eli agreed, then kissed him again. Deeper this time. They stayed like that for hours, kissing and talking and rediscovering hope. Outside, the Montana winter raged on, but inside, two hearts began to heal together. January arrived with brutal cold and brilliant blue skies. The ranch became a winter wonderland, beautiful and demanding in equal measure. Wyatt and Eli worked side by side through frozen mornings and exhausted evenings, their relationship deepening with each shared challenge. They hadn't rushed into anything physical beyond kissing. Wyatt was determined to give Eli time to heal, to be sure his feelings weren't just gratitude or trauma bonding. But the emotional intimacy between them grew daily, creating a foundation stronger than anything Wyatt had experienced before. Eli bloomed under the stability and affection. He gained weight, his bruises faded, and the haunted look in his eyes was gradually replaced by something Wyatt could only describe as joy. He took online classes through the local community college, determined to continue his education. At night, he read aloud to Wyatt from novels they chose together, his voice bringing stories to life by the fireplace. I got an email today, Eli said one evening in late January, his voice careful. From my mom. Wyatt's protective instincts immediately flared. What did it say? She wants to meet. To talk? Eli's hands were shaking slightly. She said she's been thinking a lot since Christmas. That she misses me. What do you want to do? Wyatt asked, though privately he wanted to tell Eli's mother exactly what he thought of her. I don't know, Eli admitted. Part of me wants to see her, to hope that maybe she's changed. But I'm scared. What if it's just to tell me again that I need to change? What if she asks me to choose between you and her? Then you tell her there's no choice to make, Wyatt said firmly. You're your own person, Eli. You don't have to apologize for who you are or who you love. Eli looked up sharply. Who I love. Wyatt realized what he'd said, but he didn't take it back. Yeah, who you love. Wyatt, ... Eli's eyes filled with tears. I do love you. I know it's fast. I know it might be crazy, but I can't help it. You've shown me what love is supposed to look like, patient and kind and accepting. How could I not fall in love with you? Wyatt pulled Eli into his arms, his own emotions threatening to overwhelm him. I love you too, he murmured against Eli's hair. I didn't expect it, didn't plan for it, but here we are. They held each other for a long time, the weight of the words settling around them like a blanket. "Will you come with me?" Eli asked finally. "To meet my mom?" "If that's what you want," Wyatt said. "I'll be right there beside you." They met Eli's mother at a diner in Whitefish 2 weeks later. Wyatt drove, his hand steady on the wheel, while Eli's knee bounced nervously in the passenger seat. "It's going to be okay," Wyatt said for the 10th time. "Whatever happens, we'll deal with it together." Eli nodded, but his face was pale when they walked into the diner. His mother was already there, sitting in a corner booth. She looked older than Wyatt had imagined, worn down by something guilt, maybe, or regret. "Eli," she said, standing when she saw them. Her eyes immediately went to Wyatt, questions written all over her face. "Mom, this is Wyatt," Eli said, his voice only slightly unsteady. He saved my life, and he's my boyfriend." Wyatt watched Mrs. Morrison carefully, ready to defend Eli if needed. But what he saw in her expression surprised him. Pain. Yes, but also a desperate sort of hope. "Can we sit?" she asked. "Please." The conversation that followed was difficult. Mrs. Morrison cried through most of it, apologizing over and over for abandoning Eli on his birthday, for not standing up to her husband, for letting religion be used as a weapon against her own child. "Your father won't come," she admitted. He can't accept it. But I can't lose you, Eli. I've already lost so much time, and I can't bear to lose any more." "It's not that simple, Mom," Eli said, his voice breaking. "You don't just get to apologize and have everything go back to normal. You threw me away. You let me believe I was worthless." "I know," she whispered. "And I will spend the rest of my life trying to make it up to you. I'm in therapy now. I'm learning how wrong I was, how much damage those beliefs caused. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but please give me a chance to do better." Wyatt watched Eli struggle with conflicting emotions. Finally, he spoke. "I'll think about it. But you need to understand something. I'm gay, and that's never going to change. Wyatt and I are together, and that's not up for discussion. If you can't accept that, then we don't have anything to talk about." Mrs. Morrison looked at Wyatt for a long moment. "Are you good to him?" "I try to be," Wyatt said honestly. "I love your son, ma'am. And I'll protect him from anyone who tries to hurt him, including family." She flinched at the implicit threat, but nodded. "That's all I can ask." She turned back to Eli. "I'm staying at a hotel in Kalispell for the week. If you want to talk more, call me. No pressure." After she left, Eli sagged against Wyatt, emotionally exhausted. "What do you think I should do?" "I think," Wyatt said carefully, "that only you can decide if she deserves another chance. But whatever you decide, I support you completely." Over the next few months, Eli slowly rebuilt a relationship with his mother. It wasn't easy, and there were setbacks. But Mrs. Morrison proved her commitment, attending PFLAG meetings, reading books about LGBTQ+ issues, and showing up consistently for Eli. She never asked Eli to change. She apologized to Wyatt for what Eli had gone through, and slowly, painfully, a new kind of relationship emerged, one built on honesty rather than expectation. Eli's father never came around. It hurt, but Eli found peace with it. "I can't make him love me for who I am," he told Wyatt one night, "but I can choose to surround myself with people who do." The ranch thrived under their joint care. Eli proved to have a talent for business, helping Wyatt expand into agritourism, hosting city folks who wanted to experience authentic ranch life. He created a website, managed social media, and brought in new revenue streams. But more than that, they built a life together. They adopted a rescue dog named Scout. They hosted barn dances that became legendary in the county. They became known as the two cowboys up at Sterling Ranch, and most people said it with affection. On a warm June evening, 6 months after that fateful Christmas Eve, Wyatt led Eli on horseback up to a meadow overlooking the ranch. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. "Why are we up here?" Eli asked, laughing as Wyatt helped him down from Dakota. "Because," Wyatt said, suddenly nervous in a way he hadn't been since he was a teenager, "this is where I come when I need to remember what matters. And I wanted to ask you something here." He pulled a small box from his pocket, watching Eli's eyes go wide. "No, it's only been 6 months," Wyatt said. "I know some people will say it's too fast, but I've never been more sure of anything in my life. You walked into my world on the worst night of yours, and somehow we saved each other. I don't want to spend another day without you being mine officially." He opened the box, revealing 2 simple silver bands. "Eli Morrison, will you marry me?" Eli was crying, but he was also laughing. "Yes," he said breathlessly. "Yes, of course I will. I love you so much." They kissed as the sun set over Montana. 2 people who'd found each other when both had given up hope. "Tell it again," the little girl demanded. Snuggled between Wyatt and Eli on the couch, Eli laughed, exchanging a glance with Wyatt over 6-year-old Sophie's head. She was their foster daughter, the first of what they hoped would be many children who needed the same second chance Eli had gotten. Again. Wyatt pretended to groan. "We've told this story 100 times, but it's Christmas Eve," Sophie insisted. "And it's a Christmas story." Okay, Eli conceded, pulling her closer. "Once upon a time, on a very snowy Christmas Eve, a cowboy was driving home alone, ... As Eli narrated their origin story, carefully edited for a 6-year-old audience, Wyatt looked around their home. The Christmas tree sparkled in the corner, surrounded by presents. The fireplace crackled warmly. Through the window, he could see snow falling gently. Nothing like the blizzard that had raged a year ago. Mrs. Morrison would be arriving tomorrow for Christmas dinner. It would be the first holiday they'd all spend together, and while Wyatt knew it wouldn't be perfect, it would be theirs. "And they lived happily ever after?" Sophie asked, even though she knew the answer. "They did," Wyatt confirmed, meeting Eli's eyes. "They really, really did." Eli smiled, that brilliant smile that still made Wyatt's heart skip a beat. "Want to know a secret?" he whispered to Sophie. "The cowboy saved me that night. But the truth is, I saved him right back." "How?" Sophie asked, eyes wide. "By teaching him that love is worth fighting for," Eli said, "and that sometimes the family you choose is even stronger than the family you're born into." Sophie seemed satisfied with this answer, settling back against them contentedly. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the ranch in white. Wyatt thought about the man he'd been a year ago, successful but lonely, resigned to a life lived half in shadow. Continue 8:07 a.m., then he looked at Eli. Now his husband, his partner, his home. At Sophie, who'd come to them from her own difficult circumstances and was slowly learning to trust again. At the life they'd built together from the ruins of their separate pain. Some people believed in fate. Others believed in coincidence, but Wyatt Sterling knew the truth. Sometimes the universe conspires to heal 2 broken hearts at once. Sometimes, on the coldest night of the year, you find exactly what you've been looking for. And sometimes, saving someone else is how you finally save yourself. Thank you for joining Wyatt and Eli on their journey. This story is dedicated to every LGBTQ+ person who has ever felt lost, abandoned, or alone, especially during the holidays. You deserve love, acceptance, and a place to call home. If you or someone you know is experiencing homelessness or family rejection due to their sexual orientation or gender identity, please reach out to resources like the Trevor Project, True Colors United, or local LGBTQ+ support organizations. You are not alone, and there are people who want to help. Remember, your story doesn't end when someone rejects you. Sometimes, it's just beginning.